Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So, I just watched Invincible season 2. Let's talk about it. So Invincible is back. It has returned for the second half of the second season. Yes, there was that really annoying gap in between the first part of the second season and the second, but we have finally gotten the season finale of season 2 of the show, and I have some thoughts. I have some thoughts which we will dive into in today's video. But before we get into all of that good stuff, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. But now without further ado guys, let's get into this. So Invincible season 2 follows on from the what can I even say? What can I even say? From the insane season finale of season 1. Now, some of you may not know this for whatever reason. Maybe you're new around here. Hi, my name is Jean, and I am a gargantuan Invincible fan. I am a huge Invincible fan. Invincible to me and to many others is one of the greatest superhero projects that we have gotten in the last few years. By far, actually. By far, actually, like, it's not even a competition, especially if we're talking animated shows. Oh please, like, Invincible was just absolutely brilliant. The first season of the show blew my mind and blew expectations out of the water, and so the stakes were really high for the second season. And so keeping in mind the fact that I did have such high expectations for season 2 of the show, I think it's really important to note this because it will definitely colour my thoughts on the season overall. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Back to the story. So as I said, we're rolling on from the season finale of season 1, which was absolutely insane and saw father fighting, battling against son, where Mark was beaten bloody by his own sinister father, who was revealed to be a Viltrumite colonizer who had been sent on a mission from Viltrum to conquer Earth. You know, all this time where he was being the quasi-Superman of this world, everyone thought him to be a hero on their side. Well, he ended up killing the entirety of the Guardians of the Globe, and ultimately his goal was to take over the planet all along, and he wanted to train Mark and manipulate him into being his sidekick to go along on this mission with him. But Mark, of course, being half human and being rather fond of planet Earth, absolutely refused, and he ended up fighting against his father, barely getting away with his life, and only because his father tapped out at the very last minute. But we all have that image in our minds of poor Mark Grayson on the ground in that mountainside. It was literally in the mountains, amongst the mountains, okay, where his face is just like bloody and swollen and gonflé and all sorts of things going on his face. He was just brutally beaten up by this extremely powerful being. And so understandably, the first part of season 2 delves with the aftermath of that, not just for Mark mentally, although he has a lot to go through. Most of his emotional turmoil is centered on the fact that he is just absolutely terrified of not just his father, but becoming his father after realizing who his father really is, and, you know, seeing the Viltrumite side of him blossom. He's terrified that he's going to become just like him. Mark starts to see elements of himself and his personality and his, you know, physicality develop that terrify him, because all he can see is his father, because it was revealed that his father is an absolute monster, and considering what he did to Mark himself, to the world, and to his mother, the last thing that he wants is to become that monster himself. So that's the kind of inner turmoil that the character has to go through throughout the series, but he is trying his best to step away from that. He is working with Cecil and his version of S.H.I.E.L.D. initially, just to kind of really prove to them that he's on their side. Like, he's a good guy, he's a good superhero, he can be trusted. So he's following their orders, he's doing their missions, and yeah, sometimes they butt heads, but ultimately Mark just really wants to prove that he can be a superhero, he can be invincible, but do it the right way and not his father's way. But he's also trying to distance himself from his father by pursuing regular old teenage boy stuff, like being in a relationship with Amber and enjoying his time with his friends, kind of, not really. But also, of course, he makes the big jump to college. He ends up going to university, and so this is a new chapter in his personal life that he has to look forward to, and again, yet another way for him to distance himself from Nolan and his shadow. But ultimately that doesn't work out. Ultimately none of this stuff works out because chaos ensues, and one of the missions that Cecil sends Mark on ends up being a fight against this interdimensional traveler called Angstrom. Now, little does Mark know that Angstrom actually wants to do good, because he has seen many different realities where Mark and his devilish father Nolan, end up, taking over planets, colonizing the place, killing scores and scores of people, like just creating the worst destruction in all of these different iterations of Earth. So Angstrom has seen some things, he has seen what Mark is capable of, and he is trying to use his gifts of interdimensional travel so that he can work across the multiverse and achieve world peace or something. Like, he was actually a good guy, he was trying to actually save people, but Mark comes in swinging first and asking questions later. He ruins the whole process with the machines and the thingamabobs, and so therefore, instead of working with a potential ally who could help him make the world a better place, he ends up creating his own arch nemesis as Angstrom is physically mutilated and he goes through a lot, and his mind ends up being corrupted. Those pure thoughts of trying to save the world and whatever are corrupted by the anger and revenge that he wants against Mark, not only for what he did to him in this reality, but in all of the realities across the multiverse. Oh, and yeah, by the way, this is another multiverse story, technically speaking. As we all know, the multiverse has become a very popular concept to explore in this stage of the comic book projects renaissance that we're in. And I don't know how I feel about how the multiverse has been executed across these different franchises. So far, I would say that the Spider-Verse franchise definitely has a leg up with the concept and execution of the multiverse. It still has yet to be beat. Marvel is still trying, I don't know, but they lacked consistency and vision in their version of the multiverse, and not to mention their multiversal villain Kang is no longer in the books, and so that's a bit of a mess over there. Although I will say it was done pretty well in the Loki series, so they do have that. But when it comes to Invincible's tackling of the multiverse, it's a more minor aspect to the storyline that ties into Angstrom's side of things, but we see it play out a lot more in the season finale, and I think they do a decent job of it. There are some cute little cameos here and there as they allude to some random characters that are definitely not copyrighted by other companies, wink wink. So that was fun, but overall I wouldn't say that the multiverse plays a huge factor in the story of season 2 of Invincible, although now that I'm thinking about it, it kind of does, because it does show that in almost all versions of reality, Mark ends up being this evil, cruel villain who works alongside his father to conquer Earth. So I guess that is a pretty important point for this story, because Mark in his reality on the show is trying his absolute best to distance himself from Nolan, because his worst fear is becoming his father, which apparently may or may not be inevitable considering what's happened elsewhere. Who knows? We'll see see. That all comes to a head in the season 2 finale, where we get this bombastic return of the character, okay, who has apparently been further modified, but he still has a lot of anger and hatred for Invincible, and of course Nolan, who's nowhere to be found. More on that in a second. But he comes back to planet Earth to dish out his revenge, and the best way that he knows to get Mark's attention ASAP is to attack his family, including his newfound baby brother. Again, more on that in a second, but also his mother. By the way, this is a crazy weekend for people attacking mums. Crazy weekend for revenge stories revolving attacking mums, okay? Both between Invincible season 2 finale and Monkey Man. Like, I don't know what's in the water, but that is wild. Those two projects ended up being far more similar than I ever would have predicted. But this all leads to a crazy kooky action sequence where Angstrom is sending Invincible out into these different dimensions. All the while, he is getting increasingly angry and corrupted and just crazy, okay? And then he even ends up attacking Debbie, Mark's mother, and breaking her arm clean off. There are moments throughout season 2 of this series where I've literally had to just like sit there with my jaw on the ground, with my jaw in the wooden floorboards, because what do you mean? He broke Debbie's arm clean, like I can't get that image out of my head. Oh my god, that was insane. That was actually the big OMG moment of the finale, because like we all know about the season 1 finale being crazy with the train and the beat, and that was crazy. So how do you top that? You get this madman, you get this crazy guy chopping, literally breaking clean off Debbie's arm. That was just yeah, that was an OMG moment for me, I have to say. But before we continue with the rest of the season 2 storyline, I will say when it comes to the Angstrom storyline, even though that moment where he breaks Debbie's arm was crazy and one of the most impactful moments of the whole season, let alone just the finale, I do think the storyline was poorly handled overall. I thought there was potential with Angstrom being an arch nemesis for Mark to kind of fight against throughout season 2, but I was surprised to see how they handled the character, because he kind of, you know, dipped in at the beginning of season 2 and then dipped out for ages and ages. We kind of forgot about him. The story kind of bobbed and weaved to different places, and then when he returns, it's like, oh yeah, I forgot that you were a thing. Like, I forgot about you. And so he kind of lost his impact as a villain. They didn't really give him a chance to establish a more personal, confrontational relationship with Mark throughout the season, so that would build to a huge kind of blow up in the season finale. Instead, because he was absent for so much of season 2, his presence literally wasn't felt, and so his impact was lessened in the season finale. Like, it was weird for him to be the ultimate big bad for season 2 when he was just absent for so much of it. And this wonkiness in the storytelling was kind of exemplified in the season finale on its own, where we got a mixture of different tones that I think didn't really suit the situation. For instance, I just mentioned how Debbie's arm was broken clean off, which was crazy and left me in a state of shock, but that moment was soon after followed by Mark being, you know, in another dimension and he's hanging out with cavemen. Or was there a Fortnite reference? Was it Spider-Man or Batman? You know what I mean? Like, there were various moments where there were cameos and little nods and hints to different characters. My brother even mentioned that there was a character called Generation Rex that was referred to. So like, there were all of these different hee hee ha ha cute little moments. And I think the tones kind of clashed with what was going on in Mark's real house with his real mother and half brother, who were very much under threat by Angstrom. So I think the finale had a bit of a tonal mismatch. I think the moment where Debbie was attacked in such a brutal way deserved a bit more of a pause and a bit more of a solemn tone. And it's a shame that they just cut to this more light-hearted tone with Mark in a different dimension, because it kind of lessened the impact. I mean, maybe their intention was to lessen the impact, but for me, I was still in a state of shock, to be fair. Like, I was still shook, so like maybe it didn't lessen anything. But as I mentioned, there were several other storylines playing out throughout season 2. Next one up, we have to talk about the other party in the infamous season 1 finale, and that was Nolan himself. For Omni-Man, what happened to Omni-Man when he raced off of planet Earth after almost killing his own son? Well, it turns out he went to another planet, a bug planet, where he mated with a bug woman and had a child with her. The Nolan storyline to me was one of the most frustrating things about season 2. I'll be so honest, because what do you mean, Nolan? What do you mean he went to a bug planet and had a kid with another? Like, is this in the comics? I feel like it's in the comics, right? Like, it's probably in the but I disagree with this storyline wholeheartedly. I think there were several missed opportunities here. I don't think we were at a stage where Nolan should be adding kids to his roster when he hasn't even reconciled with his first, I think, his one child, Mark, the protagonist of this show. Okay, like, he doesn't have time to be adding more kids. So you almost beat your other son to death. Are you, like, be for real? Be sick. Oh, this man pissed me off so much. So yeah, I think the story was just so messy, because in reality, after the intense season 1 finale, what we really needed was a sort of build up to the reunion between Mark and Nolan, and for them to, I don't know, beat each other almost to death again, literally, and then they would talk it out, and then something would happen, and then maybe they could reconcile, or maybe Mark would just decide to cut ties. And personally, I think that's what he should do. But yeah, I feel like more attention needed to be paid to just that relationship, putting aside any other baby mamas and babies out there. Just that relationship needed to be spotlighted, because they did such an incredible and intense job of just destroying that father-son relationship in the season 1 finale, but then didn't pay half the attention to building it or further exploring it in season 2. So again, missed opportunity. I was really frustrated by the way that they handled this storyline, but fine. The direction they decide to go in is that they introduce this other kid, and that Mark, being the warm soul that he is, okay, being the kind-hearted person that he is, he decides to take on his little baby brother, who gets called Oliver, and his mother, who's also a kind soul, kind of adopts him and takes care of him and starts to raise him as her own. That, like, oh, that's crazy. Only for her to end up with her arm, whatever. Anyways, but she does the kind-hearted thing and adopts Oliver, and even protects him from the likes of Cecil, who's been doing all sorts in his camp, experimenting on people, reconstructing people from metal, like, whatever. He doesn't need to be anywhere near Cecil, and so Debbie has been protecting Oliver and raising him and taking care of him. And honestly, Debbie and Mark, they're better than me. They're better than me. They're better than me. You would never, I would, please. But Mark's kindness doesn't just stop there, because he also tries to help Nolan, help the bug people, kind of save their planet, because their planet is on the verge of destruction or whatever. And so, you know, he lends a hand, and that's when they start to have a bit of a conversation about what happened, although not really. But Mark ends up sacrificing his first few semesters in college, just so he can give a hand to his crappy father as he tries to save this bug planet, where he impregnated this bug woman, whose lifespan is much shorter than that of a human, let alone a Viltrumite. So, like, what kind of messy nonsense is this? What kind of messy, disastrous nonsense is this? And then the icing on the cake is the Viltrumites are out to get Nolan. The Viltrumites are out to get Nolan because he failed to fulfill his mission of conquering Earth for the Viltrum Empire, and so they're out to get him. Like, they want to kill him, and they manage to kidnap him, and he ends up on a ship, beaten, bruised, bloodied, which for Nolan is a huge deal, but ultimately he will be sent out to be killed because he failed the Viltrum Empire. But again, in terms of my critique of that storyline, it seems like they left off in a very weird place, especially if you consider the season's finale where Nolan is like, oh, I deserve to die and blah blah, feeling sorry for himself. Like, you're not serious. But it was an odd place to leave that storyline for season 2. It felt quite incomplete, and it didn't feel like we got enough Nolan throughout season 2 overall, especially considering, again, the lead up that we got after the season 1 finale. So yeah, my feelings towards the exploration of the relationship between Mark and Nolan are a little bit mixed, I'm afraid. Considering what they built up in season 1, I expected this storyline to be so much more central to what would be explored in season 2. Like, this is one of the most compelling storylines of the whole show, so the fact that they sacrificed so much of it for the sake of these other piddling storylines that I wasn't as interested in kind of disappointed me. And speaking of the piddling storylines, we had quite a few. We also had the new Guardians of the Globe and their situation, trying to figure out their team dynamics, and also there's an episode where all of them die, and I thought that was a really ballsy move. Like, I was like kind of standing up, giving them a round of applause for doing that, because obviously we all remember the season 1 pilot, not even the finale, but the pilot that set the stage for this whole crazy show, where you got the previous Guardians of the Globe just being killed left, right and center by Nolan. Like, we all remember that iconic scene, and so I thought there would be a replica of that in season 2, with the young Guardians also being killed off by this like random bad guy. But unfortunately they kind of walked that back and everyone ended up surviving. Duplicate ended up having an original version of herself in hiding, and so what's his name, Immortal, that's it, Immortal, who had this weird relationship with her, was really sad about her dying and just absolutely devastated. And I was like, this isn't even a relationship that they're invested in, let alone us. Like, I swear they were just F buddies. Like, I didn't think it was that deep, but Immortal was just beside himself, like, oh, Duplicate has died, blah blah blah. I'm like, why does he care that much? That's really weird. Either we're missing a few scenes, or this is a really random storyline that hasn't really been given enough time to fully develop so that we can care about their relationship, because all I saw was him having a threesome, foursome, fivesome with various versions of Kate, and I never thought that that was a serious relationship. So it was weird that they spent so much time showing how affected Immortal was. And then you also had the Ant-Man equivalent girl, the tiny girl, who went inside the bad guy, and then she ended up being trapped in there, and I thought that's how she was going to die, and I was pretty impressed with that. Again, I was like, oh, that's ballsy, they're really going for it. But they reversed that too, and she's fine, she's just recovering, and I was like, they could have just killed her. Like, no disrespect, but she's not that much of a valued character that you have to keep her in, and there's quite a few members of the Guardians of the Globe at this point, so they could afford to get rid of a couple. Sorry if you're a huge fan of the Guardians of the Globe, but yeah, that was a missed opportunity. And then Rex, I thought that Rex was also going to die, although I wasn't against the idea of him just having been, you know, shot in the head and out of commission forever. And to make matters worse, they didn't even fully explore the idea that he was traumatized by the fact that he had his brains literally blown out. So all in all, that episode, that storyline was just a waste, and again, it was just amongst a bunch of these other piddling storylines that didn't really go anywhere and were kind of disappointing considering the caliber of storylines that we got in season 1. And another piddling storyline is Mark's love life. Listen, okay, I love Mark. I love me some Mark Grayson, please don't get it twisted, okay? And I really liked his relationship with Amber. Now, did I think Amber was annoying as hell? Yes, absolutely. But did I think that she warranted the hate, the vitriol that she got? This animated character. Do I think she deserved that? Absolutely not. Do I think that some of that was colored by all of the isms across the fandom that disgusted me to see? Yeah, I definitely think that played a part in it, okay? But personally, my annoyance towards the character wasn't because she was a black girl, please, okay? It was because she was annoying. It was because she wasn't, but I didn't detest her. Like, I wasn't the vile things that people were saying about this character. Whew. I just thought it was frustrating that, you know, obviously you have this female girlfriend character, the likes of like Mary Jane from the Spider-Man films, who is dating a superhero, and there's an inherent conflict with that because, you know, the superhero is going to be off doing superhero things and you're just going to be sitting there at home like, oh, we were supposed to go on a date, or oh, we haven't really hung out lately, or oh, does he even love me anymore? Like, that's always going to be the role of that kind of female character or love interest character, and Amber happened to be, you know, in those shoes for seasons 1 and 2, and that did make her a pretty frustrating character to have to watch. So whilst I don't think it warranted the hate and vitriol that I saw online towards the character, and those comments were definitely colored by other things, other isms, okay, but I do think that it was really frustrating to see this kind of character on the show, especially considering how, you know, we know how much Mark is going through with his father, with being invincible, and so having a character like that kind of obstructing him and his path is annoying. But what was even more annoying is how much time season 2 dedicated to just breaking these characters up. Like, I knew Amber was not going to be endgame. I knew Eve was going to be endgame. So it was really annoying to me that they kind of protracted and elongated that storyline, and it took up so much screen time, precious screen time of the show, to just be like, oh, me and Amber aren't working out, and oh, I really want it to work but it's not, and all that. Like, oh, I wish they just had broken up in the early episodes and it would have been fine. But I do think that part of that storyline and the depiction of Amber on the show overall was influenced by the backlash that the character got in real life, because there are moments and lines that kind of allude to the fact that she's well aware that she's dating a superhero and that she should be understanding, but it's still hard for her. So they really made an effort to allow the character to justify her thoughts and feelings on her relationship with Mark, and I see that as a reaction to the hate that she got in real life as an animated character. But still, it didn't change the fact that I was annoyed that so much time was spent on this storyline, because I literally just did not care. I literally just did not care. I didn't care too much about Amber and Mark's relationship, and I certainly won't be caring too much about his and Eve's eventual relationship. And I thought it was super random and ham-fisted in the season finale, where future Eve came in with the rest of the Guardians of the Globe to save Mark from that alternate dimension, only for her to tell Mark that she loved him and that younger Eve also loved him and that he should say something to her. That was so freaking random and so cringe and awkward, and yeah, like I said, really ham-fisted and handled poorly. Let's see how it plays out in season 3, but ultimately I'm just glad that Amber can get some rest, because considering the hate that my sister got outside here in the real world, in this alternate dimension we call our planet Earth, I think it was so unwarranted. A lot of it, like I said, was laced with all sorts of isms, and I just really hated seeing the fandom be so ugly towards this character. So I'm glad that it's done at the very least, even though the price we had to pay was like 75% of season 2. Now listen, I actually have to get going soon. I have somewhere to be, so we're gonna have to wrap this up real quick. But those were most of the main storylines of season 2 of the show. As I said, it was a little bit jumbled and uneven, and unfortunately some of the storylines that I wanted to see play out in season 2 were kind of given the back foot, which is a bit disappointing to me. Hopefully in season 3 we'll get more of Nolan, okay, and we'll get more of Alan as well. Alan went through some things. He's working for a Viltrumite who's against the Viltrum Empire. Like, that's a big deal. So I hope we get to see more of them in season 3 and we get to refocus on the storylines that I think most of us are more fans of. But in terms of the rest of the series, I would say that it delivered on brilliance once again. Invincible still remains one of the best shows that I've watched in the last few years. I really enjoyed the series. Yes, the second season was a little bit bumpy story-wise, and the release strategy was super awkward. I really hated that gap that they had between November and March. But ultimately, every single week when a new episode dropped, I was holding my breath. I was giddy. I was really excited to see what they would come up with. And even though some episodes are disappointed, overall, I really love this series. I love the concept. I love the characters. And the fact that I want to see more of some characters isn't the biggest critique that I could have. Although, speaking of critiques, I will say the animation. The animation itself was a little bit wonky too, alongside the storylines. There was a pretty meta moment in, I think, the penultimate episode where Mark goes to meet one of his favorite comic book writers, and he talks about how animators will use certain shortcuts like establishing wide shots and, you know, covering the mouths of the characters so they don't have to animate it, or sometimes the quality of animation changes from scene to scene. And that was cute, you know, that was a very cute meta joke, and obviously it's a wink nudge to all of us who have been complaining about how long it's taken to get a season 2, but it doesn't change it doesn't change the fact that season 2 had quality issues. The quality of animation was a little bit inconsistent, unfortunately, and it was quite noticeable scene to scene, you know, as the comic book writer said. So I think that's a bit of a shame. Even though waiting for season 2 of Invincible was painful as hell, I still would have preferred it if they had taken a little bit more time and, you know, really fleshed out the animation, really done a good job with it, and then released it all in all on a weekly schedule instead of splitting it in 2 parts, because the 2 parts thing was annoying as hell, and I think it really killed the momentum of the second season of the show. And even reflecting back on some of the critiques that I have for the story itself, I think the story even needed more time to be fully fleshed out, because there were several storylines that seemed to kind of fizzle out, maybe because they ran out of time with the storyboarding, or because they ran out of time in terms of the length of the season itself. Whatever it was, there were several issues story-wise, and I think a glaring issue, for example, is that weird kind of the Mummy or Moonlight storyline that we got in the season finale with those 2 women that awaken this ancient Egyptian demon in like a burial site. Like, what's going on there? That's just tacked on in the season finale, and it feels like perhaps originally they would have had more to kind of explore with that, but it doesn't end up going anywhere because it abruptly ends. But as much as I had several critiques of season 2, one of the critiques will never been and never has been the voice cast. Steven Yeun continues to be one of the most talented voice actors ever, actually. The emotion, the personality, everything that he pours into the character of Mark is just astounding. He is the poster boy for having a, you know, famous celebrity voice actor deliver 10s across the board every single time. These other celebrity voice actors want to come in and cash in a quick check. Yeah, they have nothing on Steven Yeun, okay, because he delivers each and every time, and it is incredible, as does the entire cast, the regular voice actors like Sandra Oh and J.K. Simmons, who we got too little of this season, but also the recurring characters and the guest stars, like for instance Sterling K. Brown, who joins the series voicing Angstrom. The voice work here is just absolutely astounding, and which is another reason to advocate for better animation to match up to the quality of voice acting that we get on the show. I'm going to be giving season 2 of Invincible a 7.5 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Invincible season 2, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of the season down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.